As you've heard, my name's Sam Atherton, and I have the pleasure today of talking to you all about the Skills Accord, representing really what's been a fairly small group of us working on the project over the last 12 months. So for me, the purpose of today, more than anything, is to give you a little bit of a flavour of what the Skills Accord is all about. I actually missed some of the earlier presentations, so apologies if I do overlap anything that's already been said. But in doing so, I hope you'll all agree it's a worthwhile endeavour, and hopefully we can generate some more interest in potentially becoming involved in the Skills Accord once we get out of the pilot phase. So I'm not generally renowned for short and incisive presentations, but I'll try my best. I am conscious that I am the lunch slot, so we'll move at pace. There we go. Okay, so I'll start off with why we need a Skills Accord, and a lot of this themes that you've heard throughout the day so far. So as an industry, we face major skills challenges, short and long term. We all know that. That's why we're all here. And indeed, EU skills reference is over 200,000 new entrants being required by 2027. And when you listen to Philip New earlier on, the longer-term socio-economic dynamics and the changes in our markets suggest that there's going to be even more rising demand for high skills. So if that's the case, surely we can just go out and address that by investing in our people and training facilities. Wouldn't that be great? And I suppose the answer is yes, but unfortunately it's not quite so simple. Whilst I genuinely believe that we all in the room and the sector as a whole is aligned in its support of skills development, I think short-term drivers mean there's a lot of pressure to remain cost competitive in our markets, and I'm sure you all feel that on a day-to-day basis. And unfortunately, throughout the value chain, long-term issues like skills quite often get eclipsed by short-term issues around cost pressures, and it leaves an ever-growing gap which we need to try and fill. So in that essence, that in essence, I suppose, is why the Skills Accord has come about. The Energy and Efficiency Industrial Partnership has set its members a challenge to see how procurement and contract management processes can be leveraged to enhance training through the supply chain. Or I think, as Craig probably put it more simply, how do you get companies to invest in training? So what is it? I suppose the big blue bit in the middle probably summarises it best. The Skills Accord in its purest form is a series of 5 main commitments which are designed to promote and lock in sustained investment in skills in the areas that our sector requires the most. And that final point is really, really important there. We don't want a cottage industry. We're not doing this for the sake of it, and it's not just about quantities and numbers. I know I said 200,000. 200,000 doesn't mean anything unless it's the right roles and the right people in the right places and with the right training and support. So it's about quality as well as quantity. And I know that was a key theme in the apprenticeship levy debate as well. So in terms of the Skills Accord and its 5 main commitments, and the commitments themselves, I'll run through each and just dwell for a second as we go through. So the first one is to address the skills gap shortages by contributing to a 5% sector target. Now, I stress there that's a provisional and sector-wide target that's been set. It's not really backed up because when we went through the process, what we found is we really don't have enough of a feel for what proportion of our sector as a whole is going through what we would deem eligible training. And whilst we do have individual companies and their own data, it's all recorded differently and in different ways. So we need to try and align and understand in a more holistic way where our sector is currently at. And then we can move from there. Within that commitment, each own business that signs up to the Accord would have its own targets established. And really that's just to make it fair. So talk about an overhead lines company, clearly long-term skills shortage, or a smart metering company. We've got a massive, massive gap to fill there in terms of the long-term rollout of smart meters. So those companies may be expected to contribute more. And indeed, an asset owner may be expected to contribute more than a Tier 2 supplier. So whilst there's a 5% overall sector target to start with, which again I stress may increase and will have to over time, each individual entity that signs up to the Accord will also have its own target to contribute towards that overall overarching goal. So the second one seems a little bit simpler, really, and that's to promote signing up to the Accord throughout the supply chain. And just to really elaborate on that and clarify, what we're saying here is that's the existing supply chain. When we went through this, we talked about procurement practices, we talked about contract management, and we thought it was really important to stop and say, well, let's not just look forward, let's look at what we already have in place throughout our businesses and throughout the value chain, and let's try and get this embedded within existing contracts and existing agreements to make sure that everybody's working towards the same target and not that we're just treating new works in that way. And that leads us into the third one, really, which is to promote relevant skills through procurement, through the supply chain. And that is about embedding the Accord and its principles throughout the procurement processes. So as we've gone through this process of setting up a skills accord, we've set up guidance documents, sample questions, things like that, and guidance as to how and where companies can apply the skills accord and its principles in their procurement process. But really, this is about making sure that skills and training and this whole agenda around the skills gap is no longer paid lip service in procurement and tender exercises and actually has a little bit more teeth to it. Number 4 I've touched on, and that's continuously improving performance. We've set an initial bar at 5%. We know that won't achieve our long-term targets, but you have to set the bar somewhere, and it'll allow us to get that initial data. We absolutely will need to increase that year on year, and there's no doubt about that. And I think in Power we were looking at 18% rather than 5% when we started. And number 5 is to monitor and report. I mentioned teeth. This is the nasty side, really. But when we went throughout the whole process of consultation, it became really clear that people wanted this to have teeth and be measurable, because if we don't monitor it, it will just become a piece of paper and something that we all sign up to and say, great, but don't act on. So we thought that was really important. And as a result, we've had to develop a cost-effective annual reporting and review mechanism, which will be supported through EU skills. I've skipped a page. So I suppose now you know broadly what it is and why we're doing it. I wanted to give a little bit of an insight into how we've gotten to where we are today, and also what the next steps are, because obviously that's going to be equally important. And then finally, how you can potentially look to get involved in the Accord once it's up and running after a pilot. So as I touched on earlier, the exam question came from the EIP Council, and in particular, I know Steve Holliday was passionate about seeing the issue addressed from National Grid. And from that, we've gone through a process of development and consultation with many parties, but there have been, I suppose, 5 or 6 main spearheads behind it, those being EU Skills, National Grid, UK Power Networks, SSE, Amy, and Thames Water. So some really good broad representation across the whole of utilities, not just power alone. And we've also obviously got the contractors group, making sure that it is the whole supply chain and not just the asset owners that are looking to address this issue. And I suppose we've been through an exhausting or exhaustive process over the last 12 months, really, in which we've developed 18 different drafts of the Accord, some as a result of my poor writing, some more fundamental issues around legislation and existing agreements and initiatives which we didn't need to overlap with. And we've conducted wide-scale consultation with up to 28 companies, including Tier 2 supply chain members as well, who would also be impacted by this. And they'll now form part of the pilot phase, which I'm really pleased to say, because I think it's appropriate that we test this at all levels. And I suppose that consultation highlighted a few key things. Number 1, it's going to be really, really important to define what is eligible training under the Skills Accord, what counts towards our 5% target or 10% target as it may become. Number 2, making it stick. Everybody was really happy with it and wanted to get involved, but equally stressed the importance of making it measurable. And number 3, at slight odds with that, making it light touch. Nobody wanted, like I said, a cottage industry. No one wants this to become an all-encompassing thing and require roles and roles and roles. They want it to be light touch, to be easily administrable, but also to be monitored and controlled in a consistent way. As well as that, we've undertaken extensive legal reviews. I know Thames Water in particular drove a lot of this along, but as did UK Power Networks. And they've highlighted some key considerations which have resulted in some of those changes in drafts. but thankfully we're now in a position where we can say this has been thoroughly reviewed and agreed upon and signed off by multiple legal teams from across those different utility sectors. We've set the initial target, and we've touched on that before, and we've agreed the cost-effective process to measure contribution, and that evaluation or monitoring process will be both qualitative and quantitative, as we thought that was important too. And finally, we've developed a series of guidance documents just to help organisations who do sign up to the Accord in embedding it within their own supply chains and within their own businesses as a whole. So before I move on to the next section, I just wanted to focus in on that point around eligible training, because I think it underpins everything else in the process, really. Rather than go through the fancy diagram, which, to be honest, is quite hard to explain in the time period we have, I'll try and boil it down to two key things, really. One, it needs to be a significant intervention, a training event or programme over 3 months roughly, and not just a one-day health and safety legislative requirement. This is about sustained programmes of investment in people. And the second point is that it must be shown to directly contribute to the development of skills or the capability to perform an operational or technical role in an area where we have a shortage of skills. And in terms of managing that and making sure that this is adhered to, EU skills will play an absolutely key role in making sure that that is applied consistently, and that we don't have organisations submitting through a light touch process things that make them look really good, but actually the stats aren't there to back it up. Hold on, try it one more time. There we go. Okay, so what's next? Entering the final stretch now, so not long till lunch. Again, I'll try and simplify this slide. It's relatively complicated when you look at it as a whole. So trying to do so, we've established a task and finish group. Now we've gone through consultation, we've gone through a 12-month process, now we need to get it over the line. So we've set that up with membership from Tier 1s, Tier 2s, and again all the sectors to work on this over the coming months. We have 28 companies, those that were involved in the consultation, and the original 5 companies that were involved in drafting the Accord, who will be involved in Year 1 pilot, setting the baseline, making sure everything works, properly defining eligible training in a bit more detail, and I know a number of companies here today will form part of that, or certainly intend to. We're going to be holding a launch event for the pilot in late summer at the House of Lords, which should be good in terms of the central government angle on things as well. And then we'll go through a more detailed programme of engagement with the 28 companies, and they'll look to identify their own companies within their supply chain so we can get an exponential rollout across the industry in coming years. Okay, so pilot success factors, really this is saying what do we expect to get from the next 12 months and the pilot period. Well, first and foremost, we'll get a finalised skills accord. That'd be great. Version 29 probably in a year's time. Along with that, we'll get finalised supporting documentation and processes. We're hoping that all 28 companies that come on this journey with us still want to be a part of it at the end of it, and that they want to cascade it throughout their businesses as discussed. We'll get a more accurate figure for that whole sector training and understand where we really are as an industry as a whole. So it's not just an arbitrary target anymore. And hopefully better eligibility criteria too, so we have a more comprehensive list of what counts. And I suppose we'll have tested it within a procurement process as well. So I know our colleagues in National Grid have opted to try and embed this within one process, and I think UKPN were looking at doing so too through my conversations with Nigel there. And all of that will give us a sustainable skills development plan. So I suppose brief recap, key features very much for me, requirement to embed it within your procurement processes as organisations if you sign up to the Accord. We've currently got a 5% target which will go up, and we've got a definition around what's eligible and what isn't moving forward. Individual organisations will be set individual targets, which as I've said I think is fair and appropriate. But we will be expected as a whole and measured as a whole as an industry to try and generate that collaboration that we've all touched on. It will have some teeth, it will be reviewed and it will be monitored, but it will be a light touch process. So, to summarise, Hopefully it's not overrun. I don't think so. Just about. To summarise, so it's a way of advancing skills agenda throughout the supply chain, using procurement practices as a key lever to reduce the temptations for a short-termist approach, which we all feel on a day-to-day basis. It will focus attention in the right areas and on the right skills for the future of our industries, and it will be monitored, ensuring that we deliver year-on-year improvements towards that long-term goal. All of which is great, but, and I stress that, like most things, it will only be as good as we make it, and I count myself and the organisation in that too. Having rules, commitments, pieces of paper, procedures, diagrams, it's all great, but really when it comes down to it, it'll be the people in the room and our businesses as a whole that really make the difference as to whether we address this and improve things moving forward. I think we do all truly believe in addressing the skills shortages, and if we do act in accordance with that, this skills accord will be one small positive factor towards achieving that in the future of our industry. And that's me really, so if you want any more information, I think you've all got a short 2-page flyer in your packs with you today, so you can have a look on there. There's some email addresses on the back page for Richard Johnson and Sue Guest, and my email address is in the slide pack, which will get sent out as well if you want to ask me any questions. So again, hopefully a useful insight, and thank you very much for your time.